Welcome to Understanding Islam, the Big Picture. This is the last in this first series, and we're going to carry on with the theme from last week, episode 11, when we were looking at what happened after the death of the Prophet. So I'd encourage you, first of all, to go back and review last week's program, to go to my website and to read the two articles that are there, so that you've got a full picture of the context of where we are going to start today. Last week we saw that according to Shia understanding, Ali was designated by the Prophet and by God as the successor to the Prophet. But in this he was not alone. So we're going to begin this week by looking at two episodes that are recorded in the Quran which help us to understand something about the family of the Prophet, that is, the family in which both Muhammad and Ali belong. The first episode is recorded in the 3rd chapter of the Quran, and in particular we're looking at chapter 3 verse 61. And the context is this: a delegation of Christians has come from a place called Najran, which is further to the south of the Arabian Peninsula. They have come to visit the Prophet in Medina, and they have there had a big discussion with him. And that discussion has been about the correct understanding of the nature and person of Jesus. And there has been disagreement between them. And then the Prophet is told, command them to come tomorrow morning to a mutual cursing. Let us stand before God and invoke the curse of God on whoever is not telling the truth. Who is to come? Well, you are to come with your families. We will come with our families. And then this term family is unpacked more. It is then said with our women, with our sons, and with our very selves, our souls. The term that's used here is nafs, our inner self or soul. Now, the Prophet then comes to the place in the morning where the cursing is to take place. And we're told that he came accompanied by 4 people. So here we have the Prophet and his daughter Fatima, come with your women, and with the 2 grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. They are the children of Ali and Fatima, and bring your sons. And then finally he is accompanied by Ali. And Ali is called by the Prophet my nafs, my soul. It is as though they share one inner light, one inner spirit within them. And so we can see that we have 5 people standing now as a group. They are Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein, and these are the people that are to represent the family on this day. Therefore, the understanding within the Shia community is that the family of the Prophet, or in Arabic the Ahlul Bayt, is restricted to mean these 5 people. Muhammad goes on to explain this theme of Ali as his nafs, as his inner self or inner soul. He says on one occasion, I am the city of knowledge, and Ali is the gateway to that city. On another occasion he says, wisdom is divided into 10 portions, 9 are given to Ali, and 1 is distributed amongst the people. And so there's a very clear understanding here then of the intimate relationship between Muhammad and Ali, almost as though they are 2 sides of the one coin, sharing this same inner light the light of knowledge. Now let's turn to another verse in the Quran and another episode recorded there. And this time we need to go to chapter 33 and verse 33. And we hear there the account of another episode. Muhammad is dressed in a cloak or a blanket, and then he successively calls under this blanket Hassan, Hussein, Fatima, and Ali. Again, there are now 5 people under the blanket. And then the verse of the Quran speaks of them being purified with a thorough purification, rendered the most pure, the highest of creation. Now, in Shia understanding, this is God's declaration that these 5 people, the Ahl al-Bayt, are rendered the highest in spiritual excellence, the highest of creation, the ones who are drawn close to God. They are the purified ones. They are without sin. Now, again, in Shia understanding, they are without sin from the moment of their birth to the moment of their death. They are the sinless ones. Or if you want a technical term, you can say the impeccables, the ones without sin, or in Arabic, masum. Because they are without sin, they are also without error. They are therefore infallible. So when they speak the truth. When they do the right and godly thing automatically, because they are these highly purified spiritual beings of the highest possible order. Therefore, we read sometimes in the Shia literature of the 14 impeccables, the 14 who are without sin and without error. Who are these 14 then? They are the Ahl al-Bayt and the descendants of the Ahl al-Bayt, those who have been designated by God to be the imams or the leaders of the community. So we have Muhammad and Fatima, plus the 12 imams, that is Ali, Hassan, Hussein, and the 9 who follow. So these then are those who were referred to as the 14 impeccables within the Shia tradition. We've seen that within the Shia tradition, the follower after Ali as head of the community should have been his son Hassan. Now let's take up the story in the Sunni tradition. As far as the Sunni tradition is concerned, it is very clear that Abu Bakr, before his death, nominated his successor, and he was to be Umar. So although this is an unusual event within Arab political life, there is a clear nomination from Abu Bakr to Umar. But it was to be with the approval of the people. And so Umar's nomination was put before the people, and the people went along and agreed that he should be the next leader. Umar is the first to use the title Caliph or Khalifa, and he calls himself the Khalifa of the Prophet. In other words, he is the follower of Abu Bakr, the follower in that line. He is to be the single leader of the community, and this includes being the commander of the military. But we shouldn't really see this as being the commander-in-chief as a single locus of authority like a dictator. Rather more, it's a guide and counselor, and the community at this time was not really under centralized authority. This was a time during the reign of Umar from 634 to 644 when the Muslim community was expanding. expanding into Iraq and expanding into Syria. Now, Umar was well known within the community as a great warrior, but also as a man of austere and simple life. There are lots of accounts about him having patches in his clothing, for example. And we know that he is converted to Islam by hearing his sister and her husband reading from words of the Quran, reading from a small written parchment. Now, according to Sunni understanding, when Umar was thinking about succession after him, he did not nominate somebody, he took a different route. He established a shura, a consultative body, an electoral college, as we would say today, made up of 6 prominent Muslims from the Meccan community. And they were to sort it out amongst themselves when the time came. When this group met in council together, one of the things that was pressed by the majority of the group was that whoever took over from Umar should follow the teachings and practices of the first 2 caliphs, of Abu Bakr and Umar. Now, this question was put to Ali. Ali and Uthman become the 2 leading candidates. Ali was asked, "Are you willing to follow the principles and practices as laid down in the practice of Abu Bakr and Umar?" And Ali says no. The same question was put to Uthman, and Uthman agreed to this precondition. Therefore, Uthman became the chosen candidate of this shura or consultative body, and he was then put to the community and he was acclaimed as the 3rd caliph. Often Uthman's life is talked about in 2 halves. In the first 6 years of his caliphate, that is from 644 up to 650, he really carried on in the practices and traditions and the way established by his 2 predecessors. But in the second half of his caliphate, from 650 to 656, then we get a move to centralize more power in his hands and in the hands of his clan. He is an Umayyad. He comes from this particular clan within what we can call the Meccan aristocracy. And he appoints from within the clan people who should be governors in the various provinces around in the expanding Muslim empire. They owe their allegiance to him on the basis of clan loyalty. And by and large, they're regarded to be efficient province managers, provincial governors under him. One of the difficulties, though, was what happened when the money was sent back into the central treasury in Medina, and the sources here record that that money was used within the clan system, and indeed there are chances of nepotism that are brought against Uthman. Now, pressure built against Uthman, both from Iraq, but especially from Egypt, because of this centralizing tendency. And eventually what happened is that a group of delegates from Egypt came to discuss the matter in Medina with Uthman, and in the course of this discussion, one of them killed him. Uthman has distinctions within the Muslim community. He is recorded as being one of the first 4 male converts to Islam, and he has the unique distinction, according to the Sunni sources, of being married to 2 of the daughters of the Prophet, both to Ruqayya and then after her death to Kulthum. He also is one who migrated twice. He migrated first to Abyssinia and then later to Medina. Let's take up now the narration from the Shia perspective. We have seen that, according to Shia understanding, Ali nominates Hassan to become the Imam, the head of the community after him. This nomination is important because it is again Nas, it is the divinely appointed Imam. It is the divine designation. So just as the prophet does not speak out of his own right, but according to the will of God, so the Imam infallibly nominates his successor, the one who is to take over after him. And this process of infallible nomination is absolutely central to understanding the Shia position, because it goes from one generation to the next until we come all the way down through the line of the 12 Imams, and each one is infallibly nominated by his predecessor. The 12th Imam in 941 goes into a kind of hidden existence. He is not visible to our sight. He is not dead, and he is alive and somehow active, but hidden. The Shia motif for speaking of his presence during this time is to say he is like the sun that is hidden behind the clouds. Even though you can't see the sun, you know it's there, you can feel its presence. And without the presence of the sun, the earth would lose heat and light and would cease to exist. So in this sense, he is the Imam of the present age. But he is also the awaited one, Imam al-Mahdi, the one who will return to the earth in the last days and lead the great fight of good versus evil, and rule the earth for a period of time in uprightness and truth. So this infallible designation is key to understanding the Shia position. You have already noticed that, according to Shia understanding, all these infallible Imams come from the Ahlul Bayt, from the family of the Prophet. We have certain hadith which help us to understand the centrality of this Ahlul Bayt within the Shia system. So we have a hadith that tells us, just as the stars will guide the mariner to safety to the shore, so the Ahlul Bayt, my family, will guide the believers safely to paradise. Again, we have another image. Just as the ark saved the people who entered into it, and the people who did not enter were lost, so those who enter into allegiance or affiliation with the Ahlul Bayt will be saved, and those who do not and fail to do so will be lost. There is an absolutely central hadith here which stands at the heart of Shia understanding. It's called the Hadith of the Two Most Precious Things, in which the Prophet says, I will leave after me two most precious things, the Book of God, the Quran, and my family, the Ahlul Bayt. They will not separate until they meet me together at the fountain in paradise. Those who hold fast to these two will be guided and will not be lost. Now, this idea then of the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran being like two tracks on a railway track. The two rails must run in parallel. If they deviate from each other by a centimetre or so, the train will not go any further. If only one rail is present, then the train will not run at all. So this is central to Shia understanding that we need both the Quran and the Ahl al-Bayt so that the train of humanity on its way to paradise can run along the track and thus reach its end goal. There is a similar hadith within the Sunni tradition, which is central to Sunni understanding. And in this tradition, the Prophet says, I leave after me the Quran and the Sunnah. Those who hold fast to these will not be lost, will not go astray. So Quran and Sunnah become the central two pillars of a Muslim way of life from then onwards, according to the Sunni tradition. If we go back for a moment into the Shia narrative, we can ask, well, why are the Ahl al-Bayt so important then as guides within the community, this twin-track approach? Because according to Shia belief, the Imams receive divinely inspired guidance, ilham, inspiration that comes from God. Now, this is not the same as the wahi or revelation that comes to the Prophet that closes with the death of the Prophet and the revelation of the Quran. But this inner knowledge, this inspiration, ilham, enables the Ahl al-Bayt, the 12 Imams that come after Muhammad, to guide the community in an infallible way, to interpret the Quran in a way in accordance with knowledge which is not accessible to other people, to lay down the pattern for following the way of Islam in a way which is divinely inspired and divinely guided. And therefore, they are the second essential track to guide the people to paradise. If we go back to the year 656, with the assassination of Uthman, there was another period of chaos within the Muslim community at this time, and the natural person for them to call to was that Ali should become the leader of the community. And so he did. In Shia understanding, he enters into his rightful place as the first Imam, the follower after the time of Muhammad, and in Sunni understanding he becomes the fourth of what are called the rightly guided caliphs, and rules as such from 656 to 661. During this time there are a couple of battles within the Muslim community. There is the Battle of the Camel, in which a group of aristocrats from Mecca enlist the help of Aisha, one of the wives of the Prophet, and they oppose Ali. And this is very quickly put down. The Meccan leaders are killed, and Aisha after this withdraws from public life. This is called in the literature the Battle of the Camel, because it's said that Aisha sat on a camel at the back of her troops, encouraging them to go forward. After the death of Uthman, one particular region within the Muslim empire, that is the region of Syria, did not support the claim of Ali to become the fourth Imam, because they wanted that he should investigate more strongly, more vigorously, the assassination of Uthman and persecute those people who were responsible. They came from the same clan as Uthman, that is the Umayyad clan. So there was this tension there. This eventually led, in the year 657, to another battle. This is called the Battle of Siffin. And in this battle, the Umayyads from Syria put Qurans on the end of their lances to indicate that they wanted to go to arbitration. So not really a battle at all in that sense, but rather Ali agreed to go to arbitration, and so the situation was resolved. Now there were a group amongst Ali's supporters who did not agree with this idea of arbitration. They are called in the literature the Kharijites, which means those who go out, those who go away, and they actually form their own independent little republics, and eventually Ali had to march against them and crush them as well. Now, these Kharijites are important because it was one of those who was seeking revenge against Ali who actually assassinated him in the year 661 in Iraq, in the city of Kufr. After the time of Ali, we now have a consolidation of the Umayyads in Syria and in Egypt. They join forces together, and we have the beginning of an Umayyad dynasty, which has its headquarters in Damascus and runs from 661 up to 750. As far as the Shia Imams are concerned, they retain their spiritual position after this time, even though they do not have the rightful political power which they believe they should have had, and the Shia then see them going on in that chain of 12 Imams up until the occultation of the 12th Imam in 941. That concludes our look at what happened after Muhammad in both Sunni and Shia traditions. Please look at both programs together, look at both articles on the website, and try then to understand both positions so that we can move forward in our understanding of Islam. That concludes the end of the first series of Understanding Islam, which we've called The Big Picture. I hope that you found it useful. You will find all 12 videos will be appearing very quickly on the on-demand site of Ahl Bayt Television, and all 12 articles are on my own website. We're going to have a break now during Ramadan. Join me again on the 18th of August and in our usual Sunday night slot from then on, when we will start the second series, which we've called Standing Before God. I wish you all Ramadan Kareem.